Thank you for your patience. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Tashidele, and a very warm good morning to all. It is a great privilege to welcome each and every one of you to the 4th Geneva Forum. I'm Kalden Somo, the UN Advocacy Officer at Tibet Bureau here in Geneva. This is the 4th Annual Forum on Human Rights, jointly organized by the Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration, and the Tibet Bureau of Geneva. This year, the Forum on Human Rights will look into human rights violations by China and suggest recommendations under the central theme, economic, social, and cultural rights violations by China. China became a UN signatory member state to the UN Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights in 2001, that is 20 years ago. In accordance with the Covenant, China has undergone 2 cycles of review by the UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The first review was in 2005, and the second review was in 2014. China is due to sit for the 3rd cycle of review by the UN Committee early next year. For this upcoming review, the UN Committee has already communicated lists of issues to China earlier this year. So with the UN Human Rights Protection Mechanism in context, in particular, the forthcoming China review by the committee, we have decided to hold this year's Geneva Forum under the central theme titled Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights Violation by China in order to substantiate, enhance discussion, and suggest recommendations for the stakeholders involved in the upcoming 3rd review on China by the UN Committee. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on the stage Honorable Sigyong Pempa Tsiringla, democratically elected leader of the Central Tibetan Administration. Special guest, Honorable Nicholas Walter, Member of Parliament, Switzerland. Chief guest of the event, Honorable Jiří Oprofilzer, Vice President of the Senate, Czech Republic. Special guest, Honorable Glensa Ferenc, Deputy Mayor for the 1st District, Budapest, Hungary. Representative Chimirik Zingla from Tibet Bureau Geneva and the Chair of the 4th Geneva Forum Organizing Committee. We shall now begin the opening session of the 4th Geneva Forum 2021. May I invite Representative Chimirik Zingla to kindly welcome the gathering.
Good morning and Trashidile, everyone. On behalf of the Tibet Bureau and Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration, I welcome each one of you to the 4th Geneva Forum. I am honored to receive Honorable Mr. Pempasring Sichong of Central Tibetan Administration, Honorable Ziri Obe Pleasure, Vice President, Senate of Parliament, Czech Republic, Honorable Member of Swiss National Council, Councillor Nicholas Walder, Honorable Kelenser Ferenc, Deputy Mayor of 1st District, Budapest, Hungary. I am also delighted to welcome our distinguished panelists who will bring their expert and research insight under the central theme of this year's Geneva Forum, violation of economic, social, cultural rights across the two-day event. I would also like to greet representatives from permanent mission, scholar, expert, academician, activists, journalists, joining us in person and virtually via Tibet TV Facebook in live streaming. We are very honored and humbled to host you all and welcome you to the 4th Forum, Geneva 2021. The collective presence of attendees from 14 countries signal the gravity of tasks we have been set since the past Geneva Forum in 2018 at the backdrop of China's 3rd Universal Periodic Review at the Human Rights Council in UN. By making the forum an annual event, we are bringing due attention to ground reality in Tibet, East Turkestan, Southern Mongolian, and region under Chinese control. The illegal CCP rule in Tibet since 1959 has forced Tibet to assimilate. China has laid down oppressive policy in China over last 60 years and turned it into Orwellian dystopia. More than 1.2 million Tibetans have been killed by People Liberation Army, including torture, forced labor camp, and prison, and at least 6,000 monasteries have been destroyed. It has plundered centuries unexplored natural resources, including land, water, forest, and mineral resources. In 1959, the International Commission of Jurists alarmed the preliminary report, The Question of Tibet and the Rule of Law, that a genocide is underway in Tibet. Since Beijing Olympic 2008, 155 Tibetans have self-immolated to defend their basic rights guaranteed under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Chinese Constitution. China has actively sanctioned the cultural tragedy upon Tibetans by intervening in centuries-old tradition of Tibetan Buddhist incarnation. While the Chinese is raging a cultural genocide in Tibet, it vowed impunity using a carrot and strict policy to keep the international community fractured. Using its economic power, China has dealt with world leader and government. Elsewhere, it also restricted access to the UN official, diplomat, international media, and even tourists from uncovering the bleak status of human rights in Tibet and other regions under the under its control. The ongoing ban on independent international media before and after Wuhan originated COVID-19 breakout is telling of the pending task ahead of us to bring China into account. China has also used its dominance to push for its so-called One China policy internationally to impose PRC's illegal claim over Tibet. The CCP efforts aim to erase the independent existence of Tibet for 2,148 years of civilizational history dating back to 127 BC, long before the foundation of PRC in October 1949. So anyone who backs this policy is essentially buying propaganda and ultimately advancing an expansionist agenda. The fact that 72 years of PRC rule has been but bad human rights record speaks volume of its motive for Tibet and Tibetan identity. Thus, One China policy is not fact of Tibet history. However, the viable solution for both China and Tibet remains the middle way approach proposed by His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama. The silence towards expansionists in Tibet has aggravated the same agenda in East Turkestan, South Mongolia. History has shown CCP's sinicization policy have wiped out Manchurian and their history of having ruled Chinese during Qing dynasty period. We have here a similar trajectory at works for Tibetan as well. Similarly, the sovereign state who share international land border and maritime boundaries with China have also suffered border incursion and a baseless claim of territory by the CCP. The Silk Road economic belt and the 21st century maritime Silk Road, otherwise called the Belt Road Initiative, was marketed by CCP as a strategy for shared development and friendship. The border dispute proved opposite. Let's remember that Tibet's illegal occupation also began with a similar slogan of the Silk Road. Countries partnering with Chinese BRI should therefore take caution and not jeopardize global peace and security. I hope that a platform like this Geneva Forum empower us to raise voice about the atrocity being faced by Tibetan, Uyghur, Southern Mongolian, and other minoritized people in national. On this note, I welcome you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Chimirik Jingla, for your warm welcome address and also giving us an overview of human rights violations by China and China's expansionist attitude and its extending immigration. Thank you so much. And I would like to request Sikyong Honorable Pemba Tsiringla to kindly deliver the keynote address.
Let me begin by paying obeisance to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to whom we owe our existence, to whom we owe his leadership and far-sighted vision, without whom we would not be where we are today. I also like to express our solidarity with the Tibetans inside Tibet, who on a daily basis go through tremendous mental and physical stress imposed by the Chinese leadership. And I also pay my respect to Sigye Rinpoche, who is present here, who has joined us in our effort to bring the plight of the Panchen Rinpoche, who has been under incarceration since he was 6 years old. For the last 26 years, we still don't know where he is. We still don't know whether he is alive or not. And therefore, Rinpoche's presence here is an important signal where even the abbot of the Tashilumbu monastery has to be involved in the release of the Panchen Lama or have some information about the status of the Panchen Rinpoche. We have been approaching the United States, the United Nations since 1950, at a time when many countries around the world were gaining independence. We came under the occupation of China. We also approached the United Nations in 1959, 1961, and 1965. There have been resolutions that were not implemented, just adopted. Therefore, we have many Tibetans, there are many Tibetans, and I think it's not just the Tibetans, but people around the world who feel that United Nations is a human body without hands and legs to implement what they have adopted. We also have this feeling that United Nations is in fact becoming more undemocratic in its functioning. It's the veto power of the Security Council is undemocratic. Ironically, India was the one who proposed China to be a member of the United Nations. But today, when you talk about the expansion of the Security Council, China is the first one to oppose India's inclusion into the expanded Security Council. We have also been approaching the UNHCR for a very long time, but to no avail. Therefore, we feel that the United Nations is also unequal in many ways. People who are incarcerated, people who are suppressed, have no space for representation. In fact, the state-sponsored suppression on people. The states are represented in the United Nations. The suppressed people have no space to express their grievances to the world community. Therefore, I come here with a lot of skepticism and also with a heavy heart as to whether anybody is really listening to the plight of the Tibetans, to the plight of the Uyghurs, to the plight of the Hong Kongers, those who are suffering in the hands of the Communist China, but also many other people who also face similar fate around the world. 155 Tibetans have self-immolated so far. Why do people self-immolate? None of these 155 people have killed any Tibetan or taken violence against any Chinese or killed any Chinese or taken up violence against the communist regime. Why do these people why are these people killing themselves, self-immolating themselves? Of course, there is a very thin line between violence and non-violence. Here, motivation matters. We have not hurt any Chinese. All these 155 people burned themselves to death in the hope against hope that the Chinese government will pay attention to their plight and resolve the Tibetan issue. In the hope against hope that the international community will pay some attention to the plight of the Tibetans. There was a time in Vietnam when one monk self-immolated and sparked international attention. But today, when 155 Tibetans self-immolate, the world watches, just watches, with no concrete action. And it's a very sad situation. That is why I say I come here with a heavy heart and with a lot of skepticism. It is at the convenience of the governments or the United Nations. When they feel like, they consider us a state. When they don't feel like, they don't consider us a state. Therefore, at the presence of our chief guest, Vice President of the Czech Senate, Honorable Jerry Oberpfalzer, here, and the presence of special guest, Honorable Nicholas Walker, a Member of Parliament of Switzerland, and the presence of Senator André Gattoni, Senator of the French Parliament, and our special guest, Deputy Mayor Gelencia Ferenczi, here, and all the panelists, experts, my colleagues from Central Tibetan Administration, Tibetan youths from around the world, different organizations like International Campaign for Tibet, is a source of encouragement for us. I appreciate your courage, your determination in expressing your solidarity with the Tibetans, with the Uyghurs, with the Hong Kongers, with the South Mongolians, and even now today, the threat that China imposes on Taiwan. I also express my solidarity with our friends, brothers and sisters in Taiwan. There was a time a few years ago when I was in Lithuania, maybe about a decade ago in Lithuania, I was talking with a friend, a political leader in Lithuania, and we were talking about Tibetan history. I explained to him about the glorious days of Tibet, the 3 centuries, from 7th to 9th century, when Tibet invaded the capital of China, Xi'an, and expanded its territory up to Samarkand in today's Uzbekistan. I talked about the 400 years of disintegration of Tibet. I talked about a little more than 100 years of the Sakya rule, or the Sakya hegemony in Tibet, and the Mongolian influence on Tibet, not ruled by Mongolians. I also talked about the 100 years of Pamudruba hegemony, the dynasty. I also talked about the 100 years of Rinpopa's history. I also talked about 100 years of Deba Tsangpa's rule in Tibet. And then we also discussed about the rule of Tibet since the 5th Dalai Lama to the 14th Dalai Lama. And then that person told me that if you look at the Tibetan history, I think you have more right to be independent than Lithuania, because Lithuania also has gone through a lot throughout their history. But considering the history of Lithuania, I'm sure that can be comparable to many countries in the world, that Tibet was independent state. And we have Michael Van Wal Praag, who had been studying this issue for a very long time. he has written about this, the legal status of Tibet. And more recently, in the last, as far as I know, he had spent about 7 years studying the history of not just Tibet, but of the whole region, and made it very clear that Tibet was an independent country. We also have a Chinese friend, Professor Lau, who now lives in San Diego, who published a book, a historical book, mentioning that whether it was the Mongolian Yuan or the Chinese Qing or the Manchu, they have never in their historical records considered Tibet as part of China. And we all know, since the 13th Dalai Lama's return to Tibet, Tibet was never a part of China. It became a part of China only in 1951, when we were forced to sign the 17-point agreement under duress, under the threat of war. Only then did we become part of China. We tried to live under the 17-point agreement for 8 long years. His Holiness also became part of the preparatory committee for Tibet Autonomous Region. But China trampled. China went against all the provisions of the 17-point agreement, which was eventually abrogated by the Tibetans when we came into exile in 1959. I will not go into detail of the present situation inside Tibet, because there are many subjects that will be discussed in these 2 days, categorically, and more particularly on the status of pension Rinpoche, which will be taken up this afternoon. And there are a host of panelists who will be covering all these subjects, so I shall not dwell on this, even though my office had prepared a very thorough statement on this, and I'm deviating from my official speech to make this extempore, considering the situation here. The situation inside Tibet, just to give you an overview of what is going on. In terms of language, during Mao's time, Tibetan language is used more as a tool of propaganda. Then there was a period, then we went through the Cultural Revolution. There was a period when Tibet had little freedom, when Hu Yaobang visited Tibet and sent back many Chinese back to China. Within this short period, the Tibetans experienced freedom. Tibetans managed to learn little Tibetan. Tibetans managed to resume their religious activities. Then again, during Hu Jintao's time, there was martial law in Tibet. And since then, the situation has been deteriorating. And today, during Xi Jinping's time, there is a lot of focus on the common language, which is Mandarin. Schools in Tibet even started teaching Mandarin, Chinese Mandarin. Now they have started teaching Mandarin from Montessori. A few years back, one of my friends who came from Tibet said that the Chinese government had this plan. Why do Tibetans learn Tibetan language? For 2 reasons. One, Tibetan religion, and the second, Tibetan medicine. The Chinese government thought that if they could translate all the religious texts and all the medical texts into Tibetan, then there will be no need for the Tibetans to study Tibetan. In fact, we value our language so much because that is the root of our culture, our religion. At one time in 8th century, we must have had the biggest transliteration in the whole world, because we translated everything in Sanskrit for this philosophy into Tibetan, and we have preserved that. In that sense, we are an extension of Indian culture. Our language came from India, not China. Our religion also came from India, not China. which China claims today came from China. So the very root of our identity is being extinguished. When you extinguish the Tibetan language, our religion also goes down with it. Our culture also goes down with it. Our way of life also goes down with it. Then there is the more important issue of Tibet's environment. We called ourselves the land surrounded by snow mountain ranges. Early part of last century, Westerners called Tibet the roof of the world. Asians called Tibet as the water tower of Asia. Lately, Chinese environmental scientists call Tibet the third pole because Tibet has the largest amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all the rivers, all the major rivers that goes into Pakistan, India, Nepal, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and into China. The two most important rivers in China, the Yellow and Yangtze, originate from Tibet. This is not a political issue. So also human rights is also not a political issue. It's a moral issue. Therefore, since COP26 is coming up, it's very important that the world also focuses on the issue of the third pole, the Tibet pole, the largest reservoir of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all these rivers in Asia. So it just does not concern Tibet. It just does not concern China, who has built multiples and multiples of dams across these rivers. But it concerns all the neighboring states. And at large, it concerns the world. Tibet's climatic conditions affects global climate change. And there is no transparency, even though China claims to be leading the fight against climate change. There is no transparency in how China is handling that. China, obviously, is the biggest polluter in the world today. Even today, as China says that they are into renewable energy, they are the biggest polluter. China presumably gives a lot of importance on Tibet's environment because it concerns the future. But at the same time, there is no transparency as to how they are handling the climatic situations inside Tibet. On the other hand, they are removing all the Tibetan nomadic communities from their traditional livelihood to compact communities. We have thousands and thousands of years of experience of having lived on that plateau. We know how to manage the environment. The Tibetan religious tradition also does not allow any action that is detrimental to the climatic conditions or the environment or the ecology of Tibet and its impact on the flora and fauna of Tibet. We have lived in perfect harmony with nature. Only after China came, there was immense deforestation. There was immense relocation of people. The main stakeholders who can be very, very instrumental in preservation and promotion of Tibet's ecology. And we have been deprived to take part in that process, in the preservation and promotion of the Tibetan environment. If you look at, of course, it has just been only 5 months since I came to the Office of Sikang. I'm committed, and our exiled administration is committed to a peaceful, negotiated, lasting solution to the Tibetan issue. A solution that is mutually beneficial, both for the government of China and the people of Tibet, whereby people of Tibet will have the freedom to practice, to use our language, to lead our way of life in a peaceful way. How much ever we wish, we will not be able to lift Tibet out of that. We cannot have another Hanuman to take Tibet out of that place and put it somewhere else. We have to live with the Chinese. China has been talking about harmonious society, both domestically and internationally. But as we know, as we witness, the whole world knows what China says and what China behaves and what China acts are totally two different things. The trade war with the United States, the developing situations with the European Union, China's relations with India, which was an unforced belligerence. Why do China do this? Just before coming here, in the last 1-2 months, I traveled to the Changdang areas of Ladakh, which borders with Tibet. I saw a lot of militarization on both sides. Why do we need spend so much money on militarization? Why do we need to spend so much money on defense? Why can't we spend, both from the Chinese side as well as the Indian side, why do we need to spend so much money on fighting against each other? Why can't we spend that money on economic development? Why can't we spend that money on education of your people? And that was all uncalled for. As we go along the border, I also went to Sikkim this time. As we go along the border, you can see that India's position has always been more defensive. They have not built roads like what China had done on the other side. China has always been offensive. Why do China do this against India, which was totally uncalled for? Why is China doing all these things in South China Sea? Why is China trying to threaten the invasion of Taiwan? When you talk about harmonious relationship with your neighbors, with the international community, we all expect it. We supported the 2008 Olympics. We supported China's entry into the World Trade Organization. Many of us hoped that China would be a more responsible power. But that has not happened. Therefore, anybody who participates in the 2022 Winter Olympics, we would consider that nation as an accomplice to what China is doing to the national minorities inside China. Domestically, we have seen these huge concentration camps in Uyghur. On an industrial scale, China went against the international norms and agreements when they imposed autonomy, the law on autonomy in Hong Kong. I really appreciate the efforts of the young Hong Kongers who resorted only to nonviolence as a means to express their anguish against the Chinese government. And we are also committed to nonviolence as the only means to resolve any conflict, including the Sino-Tibet conflict. Because violence begets more violence. Violence will never ever be a solution to conflicts. Nonviolence is the only means to resolve that. That's why I also stand by our brothers and sisters in Uyghur. I also stand by our brothers and sisters in Hong Kong. I also stand by our brothers and sisters in southern Mongolia. And I also stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Taiwan. Therefore, we will make every effort to reach out to the Chinese government. If we have to resolve the issues peacefully, then we have to talk. We have to sit. We have to negotiate and find a way that is acceptable to both sides. But till such a lasting resolution is found, we shall not shy away from expressing or to represent our people inside Tibet, to present the reality of the situation inside Tibet, in Uyghur or Hong Kong. We shall not be bound by what China wants us to do. They want us to keep shut. They do not want us to reach out to the international community. they always blame us for internationalizing the Tibetan issue. We are not internationalizing the Tibetan issue. In fact, it is the Chinese government who has been doing that. Whenever His Holiness starts traveling, whenever His Holiness meets with a world leader, it is the Chinese government who had always been objecting to that. And because of that, there has been a lot of attention from the international community. So in a way, I also thank the Chinese government for becoming our agent in promotion of the Tibetan issue worldwide. Therefore, in these 2 days, I really hope that the deliberations will be deep, the deliberations will be insightful, and then we'll come out with a declaration that will be used for the purpose that the Geneva Forum, why the Geneva Forum was formed in the first place by my predecessor, Dr. Lobsang Sengye, with the twin objective of bringing prominence to the Tibetan issue when the Universal Periodical Review on China is done early next year, as Congresswoman has said, and then also make sure that the international community play a proactive role in making China accountable in accordance with the rules of human rights. And despite all the heavy-heartedness and the skepticism that I came with, I still hope that the international community will wake up to the reality. There is a sense of realization. I had some unusual guests in Dharamsala whom I thought would never be coming to Dharamsala, but they were countries who are now from Africa, who are now expressing concern about China's activities in their continent. We do receive a lot of communication also from South America, who express their concern about China's initiatives. We all know the string of pearls that China has created in the maritime route all along, from Burma to Sri Lanka to Pakistan, even to Mombasa. They were trying to acquire the port there, and then Greece, Italy, Portugal, all along this maritime Silk Route. I also warn the countries who has accepted to be part of the Yita Yilu, as China say, to be cautious when they take up cooperative work with the Chinese government. And against this backdrop, even despite all the criticism, the skepticism I have, I hope against hope that the international community will wake up. And since we are holding this Geneva Forum in Europe, I hope that Europe will be united in its foreign policy, that Europe will be united in its trade policy. Otherwise, we all know that what former colonial states used against those who were colonized is now being used by China against Europe. One country against another. Divide and rule. Carrot and stick. If you want to be part of that process, then you are subjugating your freedom through China. Therefore, I appeal to all the countries in Europe to come together unitedly, to have a common foreign policy, to have a common trade policy, not necessarily to downgrade China, but to protect your own values, to protect your freedoms. It's not just enough to have freedom and democracy and human dignity in your own country. You have to work for the people who are suppressed. China today has military power. China today has economic power. China today has political power, but the only power they lack is the moral power. China if it has to be a responsible power, then they have to regain the trust. China, in fact, is the only country who spends more money on internal security than external security. That itself is symptomatic of the fear of the Chinese government. Now, with pressure coming from all around the world, pressure coming from within the country, I fail to understand the position taken by the President Xi Jinping, going back to socialism, clamping down on business, clamping down on personalities. It has just begun. I'm sure there'll be many more coming, and I don't know where it's all going to lead to. I've been trying to think over this over and over again as to why China is doing this. The only thing that comes to my mind is that China is very, very insecure. China fears for their legitimacy. China fears the sustainability of the Communist Party. Therefore, they are doing this. They are keeping these flashpoints burning, whether it's with India, whether it's with Taiwan, whether it's with South China Sea. And if there's a threat to the Communist Party, then they will burn one of these flashpoints and then try to evoke nationalism. And then we don't know what's going to happen. We don't want anarchy in China. We want peace. Therefore, it's time for better sense to prevail over the Chinese leadership and make changes in accordance with the international rules and norms, and to have a good and peaceful transition of China. And that is the best and the only way that China can be redeemed. Its people can gain freedom. Uyghurs can be free, Tibetans can be free, Hong Kongers can be free, and I hope you are here not just for Tibet, but for all the suppressed people around the world. And I thank you again for your presence at this conference, and I really look forward to hearing your presentations. And then, as an outcome of this, I really hope that the Tibetan agenda, the Uyghur agenda, and the Hong Kong agenda, the Taiwan agenda, will be in the forefront of the Universal Periodical Review next time around. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Sikyongpe Pachirila, for your insightful view and giving us a very powerful blueprint on critical issues to think, discuss, and deliberate in this today and tomorrow, and also in the next coming days. Thank you so much. May I invite our special guest, Honorable Nicholas Walter, the Member of Parliament, Switzerland, to kindly address the gathering. Thank you.
Honorable Sikyong Pengpat Sereng, thank you very much for coming to Geneva today. Mr. Vice President of the Senate of the Czech Republic, Mr. Senator, dear colleague, Mr. Vice Deputy Mayor of the town of the 1st District of Budapest, first district where it's just a little trick I want to share with you, that I was mayor of Carouge, a town in Geneva, and we are twin towns. It's the 1st district of Budapest. So that it is maybe, kind of sign that we had to fight also these two towns to fight in the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad and honored to be here today to address you a few words for the opening of this Geneva Forum 2021. I'm also glad to be here physically, because last year, we had to do it online. It's due to COVID, and I'm sure that it's going to be very much fruitful if we can discuss together and be physically present. I would like to thank the Tibet Bureau of Geneva, of course, for this invitation, for organizing this forum, and to be very active all throughout the year for Tibetans, but as you said before, for the freedom of the liberal democratic countries and liberal democratic societies in which we believe. The REACH program today also showed that various participants and large public that's going to attend, and is attending now and will attend all through these 2 days, show that the concern more and more concern about the Tibetan faith, but also about the human rights issue as global in China. And more concern also about the China's positions on the geopolitically in the world. This year's forum is dedicated to violations of cultural, economic, and social rights in China. Violations that are all interconnected, of course, and unfortunately increasingly frequent. Indeed, this year the stranglehold on the population of Hong Kong has been tightened ineluctably, where Democrats now have no choice but go into exile or go into jail. In East Turkestan, reports of internment camps and large-scale abuses, particularly against the Uyghur population, are multiplying, and their content is beyond comprehension. In Tibet, repression and abuses have increased as Beijing's aggressive occupation has lasted for over 70 years, a period during which cultural, social, and economic rights have been denied to Tibetans. The inaction of the international community for so many years is incomprehensible. For me, the situation of human rights and freedom in Tibet and China as a whole is a dark spot for humanity, and the community of nations. It is a dark spot for all those countries like Switzerland that did not want to see what was happening there. It is a dark spot that could cost us dearly at a time when the Chinese government is openly challenging the rules of international law, on which our liberal democracies have been built. At a time when the same government no longer hesitates to provoke its neighbors in an increasingly aggressive manner, starting with the island of Taiwan. Fortunately, in the face of this headlong rush by the Chinese authorities, we are finally seeing the beginning of a reaction from the liberal democracies, which seem to have understood the major dangers posed by the Chinese government's policy. Those several Western countries have recently made statements condemning Beijing's actions, some not hesitating to vote for sanctions against members of the Communist Party. Also still too timid for my taste, these developments are going in the right direction. And they are nearly all the result of pressure from national parliaments, which directly or through international networks like the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China no longer hesitate to denounce the crimes and demand action. So even in Switzerland, things are moving. Our foreign ministry, Ignacio Cassi, has acknowledged an increase in human rights violations in China and called for greater firmness in the face of the action of the government in Beijing, unfortunately without proposing any specific action. Contrary to our parliaments, where for more than a year, the human rights situation in China has been increasingly discussed and official actions proposals submitted. In Swiss Parliament, too, the way in which the Chinese Communist Party asserts its total control over Chinese society by crushing minorities and want to dominate the world raises many concerns in terms of human rights, democracy, free market, and respect of international law. Therefore, while we had hardly ever discussed the human rights and democracy issues in China before 2020, we have this year accepted different texts requesting, for example, a full report on the security of Tibetan and Uyghur minorities in Switzerland in the face of the Chinese authorities' intimidations actions. We also asked for a detailed assessment of the 30 years of so-called human rights dialogue between our two countries. Human rights dialogue that, we know it, didn't bring any sustainable results. But anyway, we asked for an official report that's going to be public. A motion also asking our government to promote everywhere human rights in China, including through the Swiss enterprises and companies, but also through our Swiss embassy in Beijing and everywhere. And also we asked a full report on how we could strengthen our cooperation with the island of Taiwan, which was not specified in the so-called strategy on China made by our government. Last week alone, 2 other texts were largely accepted in our Foreign Affairs Committee. These 2 motions reflect the desire to protect our country and its economy from the actions of the Chinese government, which are more and more perceived are threats. Another good news is that under the pressure of our parliament and the potential scandal it would have created, the signature of the renewal of the agreement between our two countries, including the screening by Chinese officials of all supposedly illegal Chinese citizens in Switzerland, has been indefinitely postponed. Finally, end of November, our committee will address the issue of crimes against humanity in China and their potential classifications as genocide. On this occasion, we will receive several experts, and I hope that we will come with a resolution. My only deception this year was that my proposal asking our government to negotiate a chapter on human and social rights in the free trade agreement with China has not obtained a majority in the chamber. But nevertheless, those examples show that the situation of the economic, social, and cultural rights violations in China are of increasing concern to our parliament and our population. And in addition to our parliamentary work, many of us have taken part in demonstrations on the Place des Nations in Geneva, on the Place Fédérale in Berne, and in front of the Olympic Committee in Lausanne to protest against the awarding of the Winter Olympics in Beijing in 2022, and to demand that democratic government boycott these games. Because in the face of such human rights abuses, it is our duty to call for a boycott of these games, which have no place in a country whose regime no longer hesitate to attack the universality of human rights, and therefore also the founding principle of Olympism. Dear friends, those are just a few examples of the actions we have undertaken in and outside Parliament, often in coordination with the Tibet-Switzerland Parliamentary Friendship Group that I have the honor to co-chair. With this parliamentary group, we will receive Honorable Sikyong Penpat Tsering on Thursday in the Federal Palace to discuss the opportunities to strengthen our relation, but also to better target the possible steps that our country could take to support the legitimate demands of your people. In conclusion, I wanted to deliver this message of hope. I hope it is a message of hope. To tell you that you have many friends around the world, and that if the situation is extremely worrying, the growing awareness of the dangers that the Chinese dictatorship poses to the world is also a source of hope. A hope that the international community finally imposes red lines to Beijing. And one of them is the freedom of Tibetans. And you can count on me and on the Swiss-Tibet Friendship Group to keep up the pressure on our government so that it commits itself concretely to the defense of Tibetans. I wish you, all of you, fruitful forum and success in our fight for freedom, human rights, cultural, social, and economical rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Nicholas Waldo, for your words of encouragement. And also, taking this opportunity, we would like to acknowledge and thank Honorable Nicholas Waldo for being the instrumental in bringing the agenda of Tibet and the human rights violations by China in the Swiss Parliament. Thank you so much. May I now invite the chief guest of the 4th Geneva Forum 2021, Honorable Ziri Obrofilzer, Vice President, Senate of the Parliament, Czech Republic, to kindly address the gathering.
I'm a bit ashamed that I came with such general thoughts I would present now after those excellent speeches being very concrete and up to date. So I ask you your excuse. Ladies and gentlemen, what is most remarkable about totalitarian regimes is how similar they all are in the end. Whether they stand like Hitler's Germany on the ideology of National Socialism or like Stalin's Russia in the ideology of international socialism, or contemporary China with its socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's remarkable, but actually logical, because the totalitarian state, by definition, claims absolute control over the bodies and souls of its subjects. Anything that by its very nature defies this total claim is a fundamental and fatal threat to the ruling power, a stone that can trigger an avalanche. That is why the ruling power is terrified of religion, of culture, of creative activity in general, of the traditions, customs, and idiosyncrasies of peoples and regions, of any independent thoughts. Its external enemy is not only every free neighboring countries, but the whole free world. For a totalitarian regime to remain in power anywhere in the world, it cannot do without concentration camps, gulags, or re-education centers, the names of which change over time, but the principle remains the same. It will not do without censorship, propaganda, Potemkin's village, and indoctrination of children. It will not do without forced labor. It must crack down quickly and decisively on any free-thinking initiative on unrelenting ethnic groups. From time to time, it must resort to genocide and displacement. The contemporary People's Republic of China is abandoned in all of the above. However, its brutal extermination of the Uyghurs, the Sinicization of the Tibetans, or liquidation of the pro-democratic camp in Hong Kong are just the tip of the iceberg. The coronavirus pandemic has not only exposed the utter and cynical ruthlessness of the Chinese state power toward its own population and the peoples of the world, where following the example of Soviet Chernobyl model, the main objective was to conceal and sweep under the rug any misconduct of the state and the party, and thus not allow an effective and timely defense. But it helped a lot further consolidate the system of control over every citizen of the country. Coming from a country that has its own totalitarian past, I know what I'm talking about. In China, it is not just the minorities opposing the totalitarian claim and the free-thinking dissidents who suffer, but in the end, all or many suffer, except a few select communists. To be blind to the crimes of those in power and to keep your mouth shut and to dance to the party's tune, to be constantly scrutinized and thinked on, is a painful and humiliating experience, a painful and humiliating way of life. Contemporary China has adopted much from Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, but at the same time it is more learned and sophisticated. It is not less imperialist, but it doesn't need to achieve world domination by military force. It only needs to make other countries dependent on it economically and for raw materials. It is part of its totalitarian nature that compromise is something absurd to it, since it does not intend to impose any restriction on itself, nor does it even admit the existence of any real partner, However, it is all the more happy to conclude all sorts of international treaties and agreements. And as we can see in the case of Hong Kong, they are a useful tool for expansion. They restrict and bind the adversary, and China itself violates them without scruple. Nothing new, we would say, after the experience of the 20th century. But the saddest thing about the attitude of democratic countries about totalitarianism is how deeply they misunderstand it. The policy of appeasement, concession to aggressive Nazism, only strengthened Hitler's Germany and prepared the ground for his victorious campaign on the European continent in World War II. Even the concept of détente, the easing of tension between democratic West and Soviet Union, the disarmament negotiations, and the acceptance of bipolar world notion failed to weaken the Soviet Empire. On the contrary, it was only Reagan's uncompromising stance at the declaration of an arms race with the evil empire that brought about its disintegration and liberation to Soviet camp. With this historical perspective, it is exceedingly unwise and foolish for the leaders of democratic states to overlook the unprecedented human rights violations in China for the sake of economic ties and profit, or to allow to be dictated where they may and may not to go, or who they may talk to. It is crucial for the world's development whether Tibet will be get back its autonomy or freedom, or a free Taiwan can be kept free in the struggle against totalitarianism. Our Czech experience says you can't sacrifice any nation like the pre-war Czechoslovakia was in order to maintain the peace. As we know, peace didn't last and Hitler became even stronger. With this, the same is true of Tibet. If we allow oppression anywhere in the world, we are contributing to the aggression engulf the whole world step by step. Democratic countries should not stop making the same mistake, ignoring the nature of their trading partner and building their own prosperity on the suffering of its people. We should not tolerate evil, even when it brings partial benefits. In the end, it will always turn against us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Zero Professor, for your presence here today, despite having a very tight schedule. Thank you so much for being with us today. And also, thank you for sharing the pain of Tibetan people and people suppressed by the Chinese Communist Party. And may I invite special guest, Honorable Glenser Ferenc, Deputy Mayor of the 1st District, Budapest, Hungary, to come kindly address the gathering.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Tashi Delek. First and foremost, let me tell you how honored I am to be here today. I would like to thank the Central Tibetan Administration, the Office of Tibet Geneva, and the Department of Information and International Relations for organizing this event. And I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Mr. Prime Minister Pemba Tsering for the hard work he is doing for the Tibetan community and for the diaspora. My name is Ferenc, and I serve as a deputy mayor in the 1st district of Budapest, Hungary, the capital city of Hungary. Therefore, I'm going to talk about my personal experiences and the shameful relationship of the Hungarian government with the Chinese Communist Party. It has been a while since we attended school. However, if we jog our memory, we can probably recall that kid in the class who was rather problematic. We have this kid in almost every class. One that thinks that the rules do not apply to him. One that is aggressive towards the other kids. One that with hostile behavior tries to reach dominance and respect, but in most cases, he is just a kid with serious self-esteem problems who is afraid that the truth will out. He is scared. He is insecure. We call him the bully. The rest of the class is bullied. And the reason why they can be bullied is because they accept the rules and the mindset is way different. Most often, they simply cannot comprehend the reasons of the bully, since they try to reach agreements and settle conflicts within a set of commonly accepted protocols. The foundation the international community is built upon has many familiar traits to a class. It is mutually beneficial if I know that my partner is trustworthy, reliable, and that we have a certain set of shared understanding of the world. We treat foreign citizens coming to our countries the same way we expect our partners to treat our citizens traveling abroad. The English philosopher Thomas Hobbes wrote that during the time men lived without a common power to keep them all in awe, they were in the condition which was called war. And such a war as was of every man against every man. In this state, every person has a natural right to do anything one thinks necessary for preserving one's own life. And life, according to Hobbes, in this state is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. By the age of 7, kids in general realize that Hobbes was right. If one takes someone else's toy, one can expect the same in return. This rule applies to countries too. By respecting each other's borders, we expect our neighboring nations to respect ours too. However, there are those even in the international community who, out of fear, out of low self-esteem, or simply hoping to reach dominance, do not follow the rules and bully other nations. It is due time we say, China is a bully. I have all the reasons to call China a bully. At the age of 22, I had the chance to work at an NGO in Dharamsala called Tibet World. I would like to thank Yeshi Lundup, the leader of the NGO, that he introduced Tibetan culture to me. It was a while ago. I have learned a lot about Tibetan history and culture during the course of my work there. And the nation of Tibet has grown onto me. Ever smiling people who always find the beauty in life, even though life did not treat them well. Mostly I was teaching English to those seeking refuge, and I was helping managing the everyday life of the NGO. I had a colleague, Lobsang. We became friends, and I asked him how did he end up in India. I knew he was seeking refuge, of course, in Mekhalganj, but I was interested in the details of his story. It was rather shocking. And the most shocking thing was that it was not an uncommon story within the Tibetan community of Dharamsala. on his 13th birthday, his mother told him his uncle is coming for him because they are going on a long trip. They walked from Tibet to Kathmandu, Nepal. The trip was long, hard, and dangerous. They traveled at night in fear of being found by Chinese soldiers. At one point, they ran out of food and water. They ate and drank whatever they could, mostly moss and snow. When Lobsang arrived, they had to cut his boot off of his feet because it was so swollen. Working, eating, living and traveling with Tibetans was my life for months. A life-changing period and one of my greatest experiences ever since. I learned to let things go. I have all the reasons to call China a bully. Part of my family lived in Hong Kong for more than a decade. My nephews grew up there, and they call it their home country, which they had to leave 4 years ago due to the change of the political climate. My best friend is Taiwanese, who is afraid his country will become a victim of China's ever-growing appetite, and this appetite does not end in Asia. For these reasons, I'm trying to raise awareness. That's why I've hoisted 2 Tibetan flags and a huge banner stating justice for those suffering in Xinjiang on the front of the town hall during the visit of Chinese Minister of Defense Wei Feng, who was at the building next to my office. The least we can do is raising awareness. I'm from Hungary, a country that knows submission well enough. 150 years of Ottoman subjugation, more than 2 centuries of Habsburg rule, and almost 50 years of Soviet occupation. And presently, China is standing at the doorstep and politically buying itself into Hungary. I know one should not fight fire with fire, but with hard sanctions, China should be forced by the international community to accept the common values of basic human rights. And to talk about the shameful relationship of my government and the Chinese Communist Party, our government has just signed a declaration of intent with Huawei in regard of building a 5G network in the country. Huawei is a company that was working on the face recognition software the Chinese Communist Party is using against the Uyghurs. Huawei is banned from the British market of 5G since last month. It's also banned from Romania. Their smartphones can be set remotely to identify keywords such as Free Tibet, Long Live Taiwan Independence, and can also block related content. It is a built-in censorship. Our user data can very well end up on Chinese servers. The government of Hungary is intending to set up a campus for the Chinese University of Fudan. Fudan is a well-known and respected institute. However, its loyalty does not lie with science. According to its preamble, the university is loyal to the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, follows and executes the party's educational policies, and accepts the leading role of Marxism. Moreover, the project would be financed by a $1.8 billion Chinese loan to Hungary. The question rose, why should the Hungarian taxpayers pay for a Chinese university to open in the capital? The mayor of Budapest is willing to hold a referendum whether Budapest should give home to the university. Independent statistics show that 90% of the citizens of Budapest would say no to the campus of Fudan. Beside Huawei and Fudan, I have to mention the construction of the Budapest-Belgrade railways. Its cost is estimated to be $2.5 billion US, which 85% is covered by a Chinese loan of Exim Bank and is constructed by Chinese companies, namely the China Railway Electrification Engineering Group and the China Tianjiu Engineering and Construction. Its financial return is estimated to be somewhere between 130 and 2,000 years. What a great investment, right? The details of the agreement are considered to be state secret and cannot be disclosed for 10 years. As you can see, an EU member state is basically being sold out to China, a rather dangerous path, I believe. By these examples, you can see how Hungary, that is an EU member state, is becoming a Chinese Trojan horse within the European Union. I, for myself, I do not like being owned, especially not to or by a communist dictatorship. One would ask, why is that such a big deal? What is all the fuss? It's just economics. Well, Hungary is constantly blocking EU statements condemning China for its human rights violations. Hungary is blocking sanctions that the EU would impose on China. The class is trying to stand up against the bully, but the bully is dividing the class by promises, by force, and in China's case, with death trap diplomacy.
Thank you, Honorable Ferenc Lense, for sharing your personal journey, experiences, and also a very powerful thought of the impact of indifferent attitude by the government and the change in political climate. And taking this opportunity, we would also like to acknowledge and thank for your powerful expression of solidarity and support for the pain of Tibet and Tibetan people during the visit of China's defense minister by hosting Tibetan national flag on the town hall and also hanging the banner calling for justice for people suppressed by China. Thank you so much. As a token of our respect and appreciation to all our guests, may I request and invite Honorable Sikyong Pemba Chiringla to kindly present Kata, Tibetan traditional white scarf, and two most important and latest books on Tibet. The book, first Tibet, 70 Years of Occupation and Oppression, which contains Central Tibetan Administration's official response to China's white paper on Tibet published this year. And the second book, Tibet Brief 2020. And this book is a result of 10 years of collaborative research on Tibet, which has powerfully captured and unpacked many issues surrounding Tibet and China. And in the meantime, kindly allow me to acknowledge the presence of the lead author of the book, Tibet Brief 2020, Dr. Michael van Wald-Praag. The chief guest of the forum, Honorable Ziri Obrafilzer. Special guest, Honorable Nicholas Walter. special guest, Honorable Glenn Serfans. Thank you so much. With this, we conclude the opening session of the 4th Geneva Forum 2021. Let us take 30 minutes coffee or tea break, and we will get back to the conference hall at 11:30.